Hello, and welcome to Spotlight Port Huron. I'm your host, Jeff Harrison. Today we have with us Dr. Greenberg, a professor at Oakland Community College. Today we'll be talking about his career in film critiquing. Hi, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a lot of fun to be here.
How did you become a film critic?
Well, that's a long story, which I suspect is what I'm here to tell. I always have thought of myself primarily as a writer, and I even like to write letters. I don't like to write checks so much, but I do like to write letters. And I guess it started when I was in high school and I was on the track team, and we had an assignment in English about writing, describing something. So I described how to run a half mile, and I remember getting this glowing commentary and an A+ from the instructor, and I was so pleased. And I had divided it out. You sprint the first 100 yards and so on and so forth. And when I looked back over the paper, I realized that the 880 yards in my half mile totaled up to 1,020. And I still got an A+, so I thought writing was pretty neat. And I have a long background with my family in terms of interest in these things, and writing and words and poetry. So I think that was my initial stimulation as to why I liked writing. As in the high school and in my early college years, I got interested in drama. I spent some time in New York, did some work in summer stock, and got more and more interested in writing for theater. And then in the 50s, when movies became artistically acceptable in this country, instead of just being entertainment, I got more and more interested in writing for and about the movies. In the 70s, I was doing, for the Observer and Eccentric newspapers, I was doing some theater reviews for them. And I wanted to be their film critic, but they had a film critic, so I kept doing theater reviews. And then their film critic went west to make her name in Hollywood. And they had a contest for film critics. And all of us that applied got to do, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks of doing this film column, and I won. It was great. Never won the lottery, but this was a big win for me. And so for 7.5 years, I did 2 columns each week for the 13 Observer and Eccentric newspapers. One on current movies, and one on movies coming out for the first time on videocassette. For in the recent years, this home market is more people watch movies at home than they do on VCR and home box office, movie channel and such. So I've been I did that for a number of years. And then with the recession, the paper cut back, and so I haven't been writing for them that long. Along the way, I got to do a show like this for all the Oakland County cable systems through the school, Orchard Ridge campus of Oakland Community College, where I teach. We have a broadcast production curriculum, and the students produce 2 shows a week. And for 3.5 years, I was the film critic on that, and we did not only I would be on like this and do a segment, what's the latest at the Bijou, but also I would do occasional full shows. Gil Hill, Gil Hill from Beverly Hill Cops.
Yeah.
He came in, we did a whole show with him. John Cusack, different people that were in the community promoting their movies would come out. That was a great opportunity for the students. And so that was a lot of fun too. So anyways, that's sort of talking around the issue, but that's how I got to be a film critic.
What would you suggest that people do if they wanted to become a film critic?
Well, learn to write, learn about movies. That's the basics. If you don't know how to write clearly, and you'll never get past the first test, the first time the editor looks at a mess of confused dialogue or confused narrative, he's going to say, "Oh, I got enough people," you know. That's one of the things about all aspects of show business, whether it's sports or publishing or radio, television, film. There's 1,000 people waiting for every job. Mm-hmm. And directors, editors, they know this. They don't have to mess with you if you can't put the commas in the right place. They've got 999 other people waiting. So the first thing you have to do is learn how to write clearly, specifically, to the point. And then you need to know about movies. And how do you learn to write, and how do you learn to about movies? You go to movies, you watch movies, and you read about them, and you read what other people are writing. And I always keep up on 2 or 3 newspapers with what other critics are saying. When I was writing a regular column, I would always avoid other critics until after I had my stuff in print. I'd say, "Oh well, of course I'm very objective. You know, I don't have to worry about. They're not going to influence me." But that's not true. You are influenced by every input that you have. What was that movie? Remember the little creature? Input. Mm-hmm. What was the little robot? I've forgotten the name of the movie. But
yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Well, anyways, that's the kind of, no matter what it is, you are affected by it. So I would always wait to read other critics until after I had committed my ideas to paper. But that's it. You've got to read what other critics are doing. You've got to read about movies. You've got to experience movies. You've got to experience writing. The best way to learn how to write is to write.
Mm-hmm. Could you take us to the process of how to critique a film?
Well, first thing you have to see it. That's always the first thing. And there's really 2 levels going here. The kind of popular press materials that you see, the little squibs in newspapers, little, 1-paragraph things, or a whole newspaper article about this movie or that movie, or sometimes, as my column was for a good part of the time, I would have 2, 3, 4 paragraphs about the top movie opening that week, and then a paragraph about everything else that was opening, and then a little tiny blurb about what had been reviewed in the past. And so the first thing, of course, is you have to see the movies. You have to be prepared to discuss them. And seeing the movies it can be a problem if you're in a crowded theater where most people see movies. It's very distracting. A lot of times the critics get to see them in private. And that's, I think, a better situation. Just as I said that I would always avoid what other critics wrote until I had written my material. When you're in a crowd and people are laughing or crying or going, "Oh God, what a movie," and all this sort of stuff, it affects you no matter how objective you may think you are. So if you can see the movie off by yourself, I think that's the first thing. Then I think you have to decide what is the storyline, how much of it you can tell without giving it away. In some movies, of course, it doesn't matter. Others, like the thing they're making a big deal with right now with The Crying Game, and many times the critics would have the press kit that specifically says, "Please do not reveal the ending," or "Please don't give it away," or "Limit your comments," or whatever. And of course, Hollywood makes a lot of money on selling suspense and novelty. And if you can read about it in the paper, you're not going to pay $7 to go see it. So that's the one thing, the initial viewing of the movie, making up your mind, what do you think about the film? And you really have to be, if not pig-headed or stubborn, at least you have to be tenacious about your ideas. You have to stick with what you think is a defensible position. And then you write and you describe as much as you think is necessary so that the audience your readers, can get an idea of whether or not they want to see that film. And of course, there's some things you can't drag some people to. You can't drag me to the Friday the 13th stuff. Mm-hmm. I hate it. I don't enjoy it. I don't think it's any good. Why should I go? And when I was writing a regular column, I couldn't possibly get to all the movies. Sometimes there would be screenings, 2 or 3 screenings at the same time. So I had some people helping me. I would send them to those movies. I didn't want to see that stuff. And there are a lot of people out there that'll read your column or your whatever, your kind of thing you're writing. And so you have to let them know the basics of what kind of film it is, what the basic story is. That basic story also in your review serves to give reference as you discuss the thing. And then of course you want to do the tell them what the ratings are. That's important to a lot of people. And then you have to evaluate the film. The reason people pick up newspaper magazines, what do the critics say? I like this guy. He's last 3 times, he steered me straight, and it was a good movie, and I enjoyed it. So I want to see what he says and why. And so you have to say it's good, it's bad, it's mediocre, it has good things, it has bad things, whatever it is, whatever you've decided, you have to make that clear to your readers, and you have to give them reasons. It's not good because you liked it. It's good because you have to give them reasons. That's what convinces people. Show me the facts.
Are there times where, like, your editor totally disagrees with what you've written, or sometimes you may get like letters from readers? Or?
Well, you got 2 things going there. For the most part, I never had any interference from the editors. I personally, this is just my personal taste, I always thought the 3 reels and the 4 roses and the 2 stars, I always thought that was silly. Because if you take the trouble to look at all these across the board, you'll find any one film can get anywhere from 1 star to 50 stars depending on who you read. So it's very subjective. So I fought that, but the editor said, we want some kind of rating system. So I finally, I put in the rating system. Since I teach, they thought it was cute. Professor Dan grades the movies, so I did an A+, A-, B+ thing. That was really, for 7.5 years, I mean, that's, most writers would say that I was in heaven. Every once in a while there'd be some editor wouldn't like something and take it out. And they have that, in most cases they have that right. I once did it was silly, a whole paragraph that was nothing but film titles. And it made a whole paragraph out of the different, and it was the paragraph made sense, but it was kind of silly, and the editor cut that and that sort of thing. So, but and a lot of times reporters, writers do get into deep trouble. Various First Amendment issues. There's that reporter down in Florida who's in jail for contempt of court now for not revealing his sources. And there have been cases where critics have had a huge international incident with their editors because the editor's under some pressure to, the guy who owns the paper has a piece of action of the movie and wants a good review. Those things come up once in a while, but for the most part, I think we're very fortunate in this country that we don't have those kinds of pressures. At least I never did. Was there? You had another?
Yeah. Was there
letters
from
readers? Oh yes. Usually, it was letters from people who took violent disagreement with something I had written. And if you take a position, a public position, and put it in writing, and hundreds of thousands of copies are coming out, there's going to be some people. Statistically, you can't avoid offending some people if you take a position. I think if you want to be a critic, if you want to be an editorial writer of any kind, you've got to take a position. If you want to be an investigative reporter, you have to take a position that certainly the Nixon White House didn't think well of Woodward and Bernstein, but you have to take a position. And you'll get letters. And I got some letters saying, what rock did you crawl out from under? And one of the nice things about that, when those letters are published, the person or the editor always has the option of getting the last word. So that was always kind of nice. Well, I'd like to respond to AZ of Kalamazoo, who wrote complaining about what I had said, and so you know, having the last word is very significant in who wins the argument.
How are the Academy Awards picked?
It's a big political game. I think anybody who thinks it's the best film of the year or the best actor, the best actress is very naive. The Academy has a process whereby members in each of the subdivisions vote, for costuming and sound and screenplay and so forth for the nominations. And then there's this big thing where if you look at Variety, is probably the best example, these full-page ads for your special screening for we recommend our picture, of course we recommend it, and it's being screened, and they have, with the nice buffets and everything. It's a lot of political thing. And then you'll get somebody that has done a great deal and has never gotten an Oscar, and so they give them a lifetime award, or the Thalberg Award, or one of these special awards. They do that sort of thing, but it's highly political. It's, for example, I think one of the finest movies ever made, Atlantic City, with Burt Lancaster, and he was nominated for Burt Lancaster, Susan Sarandon. And he was nominated for an Oscar for Best Actor. And everybody said, he's a loner, he's not well liked in Hollywood, in the industry, he's never going to get it. And he didn't. And Citizen Kane is another example. He was nominated for 9 Oscars, but the Hearst people were unhappy with it because it was a damning portrait of William Randolph Hearst. And they started a smear campaign and wound up and only got 1 of the 9. Even though it's now considered to be the best movie of the year. So there's a lot of politics in it. But it's still a lot of fun.
Would you say that the People's Choice Awards are a more accurate judgment of the actors and actresses?
No, that's just a different kind of politics. Because for every person that calls in, there's been a lot of research on these public opinion polls. Certain types of people who are more rabid about their ideas, more convicted, more obsessed about their ideas, are more likely to call in than some of us who are a little more laid back about it. And so it's not, I don't think it's a really sound way of saying who's the best actor or the best actress. It might very well be who's most popular, but that doesn't mean that they're the best. They're just the most popular.
What's the hardest part about your job?
What's the hardest part about being a film critic? Going to all those free movies. May sound a little silly, but some weeks, particularly for people, it's, I recognize it's hard. You got to scrape together, $5, $6 to go to the movies. That's tough. And critics never had, they always get in without paying, either these radio call-in screenings or this private room that exists, where they have critic screenings. But there were weeks when I'd watch 8, 10 movies, and particularly if a lot of them were way across town, I have to drive 45 minutes. It's just terrible to complain about. I had to drive 45 minutes to see a free movie, and then drive 45 minutes home and then write about it. Once or twice a week, but 6 or 8 times, or 10 times a week. And that wasn't bad. How did you phrase your question? What was the hardest part?
Yeah, the hardest part.
That was the hardest part, but it wasn't too hard. It's fun. If you like movies, it's a great job.
What was your least favorite movie?
My least favorite movie. The only movie I remember walking out on was, and it was at this, in Southfield, where they have this screening room, and I was the only one that showed up in the first place. It was about a kid with a mountain bike. And it was there's some term, hip, cool term tied in with the bikes, I forget. whatever. That was the title of the movie. And after about 20 minutes, I got up and I said, Hal, who's the projectionist, don't waste your electricity. I'm leaving. And you asked me what my least favorite movie. That was my least favorite movie. I didn't even stay to see it, and I don't even remember the title.
What do you think the best movie ever made was?
I will not answer that. I'll take the Fifth Amendment.
Oh.
I have I think the American Film Institute conducted this survey for a year. It was a long thing. First they sent out a list to everybody. List your 100 favorite or best movies you think are the best of all the members of the American Film Institute. So I wrote back and said, this is silly. You can't compare Citizen Kane and Singing in the Rain and all these marvelous European and African and Asian films. They just don't compare. It's even worse than apples and oranges. And they didn't take my advice, and they went ahead with this. Then they got it down to 100, and then they said, rank order these 100. And I sent back the same thing, and they went ahead with it anyways. And they came out with Citizen Kane as the greatest film ever made. I don't agree with that. I always do this with my students. I'll give you my top 40, and that list is probably about 250. But I don't think that you can pick one. Singing in the Rain is one of my favorites. So is Citizen Kane. So is Kurosawa's, a Japanese film, The Throne of Blood, which is a Japanese translation, both into their culture as well as their language, of Macbeth, Chaplin's Gold Rush, several of the Truffaut movies, Peter Lorre's first great success, M, in 1930, Marlene Dietrich's The Blue Angel. All of these are, I think they're all tied for first in my book, but I really don't think you can pick out the greatest. At least I can't.
Who's your favorite actress or actor?
Oh, well, I think Chaplin is the all-time greatest superstar of film. Interestingly, people used to think, wow, what a tremendous instinctive genius, because in the early days of film, they would just shoot him and show him. But it turns out that Chaplin got into rehearsing and practicing and trying out routines. And later on, after the first few years, he was so successful, he had money coming out of every pocket. So he could shoot a whole film 2 or 3, 4 different ways. Not a feature film, but these shorts and try out. And he spent 2 years making The Gold Rush, which he considered his greatest film, and worked out on film, full studio setup, cast, crew, worked out it's interesting, some of this footage is available now. You can get it on video, and you can see the same gag routine done 10 times, and then he would pick the one he thought was best. That's very expensive. So maybe he wasn't the instantaneous creative genius, but he was super. And so I put him up there at the top.
Do you think his movie Chaplin, do you think that's an accurate portrayal of him?
It's a nice, has a nice feel for the era. There are some significant historical mistakes. And the thing that bothered me most, you have Anthony Hopkins, who is such a super actor, in that dumb non-role of the publisher sitting there in those interludes saying, hey, Charlie, why didn't you write about this? And then they go into another flashback. And Chaplin was a very intense, passionate life. And he wasn't, in that sense, he wasn't well represented in the movie. Because the movie, every time the movie gets intense, they cut back to this thing with the publisher, and it dilutes and diminishes the intensity. So the film wasn't passionate in the same way that and intense the way Chaplin was. But I think it's worth seeing. It's enjoyable. Downey does a fine job.
What do you think are the ingredients for a good film?
Well, all the technical things, of course. You've got to get your lenses focused and your film processed properly, and the right colors. The story has to make sense. I think this is a big issue. when I teach filmmaking, I always tell students that they're creating a new world up there on that screen. And they can make up the rules, and they can have any rules they want. Look what George Lucas did with Star Wars. But you got to stick to your rules. And if you're going to make a film in this world, things have to happen properly. We were talking about Swing Kids, where we know you can't go back in history, right? But the movie starts in 1939, and then after a while it has some stuff from 1938. And that isn't the way our world works. And so you can't, they broke the rules. And I think the unity and coherence and making sense in the story, I think that's one of the fundamental issues of making a good movie.
Do you think that actors and actresses make the movie even though it's a bad script, or?
Well, it's so hard to tell. Movies are so complicated with all the screenwriters and the directors and the cameramen and camera women and continuity directors and costume and makeup and special effects. It's very hard for actors and actresses because we see the whole film as uninterrupted from beginning to end. But they're working in these tiny little units. And I'm sure you've seen these behind the screens in Hollywood projects or documentaries on TV where, you know, hello there, cut. Sorry, we got to fix it, you know. And 20 minutes later, all right, rolling, do it. Hello there, cut, you know. And take 37. And it's very difficult under those circumstances for an actor or an actress to build the same kind of emotional intensity that you expect on stage. And so their presence, their box office draw, I mean, Schwarzenegger makes a movie. And I don't know that it's because he's such a great actor, but he's a celebrity and personality that attracts. And I think you know, good actors, good actresses are important, but they may make the box office. I don't think they make the films.
How do you judge a good actor?
Well, a lot of it's emotional. Does he touch me? Does he or she make me feel whatever the situation is? You know, of course, there's the basics. Are they pronouncing the words correctly? They have a little intensity, and I'm a good example. I'm sure many people saw Silence of the Lambs. I hated that movie. I thought it was terrible. The whole ending was very unreal. Very.
It won Academy Award.
Yeah, it won 5. It's only the third movie to win the Big 5. And I don't like that, as we mentioned earlier. I don't like that kind of violence. I just don't enjoy it. But I think Anthony Hopkins did an absolutely marvelous job. And if you have seen Howard's End, which you should, you won't even recognize him. And I think that ability to do so many different roles so effectively. You know, I enjoyed his performance in Silence of the Lambs as much as I disliked the movie. And then I almost didn't recognize him. Well, I knew going in from the marquee, but you know, I really didn't. I said, no, wait a minute, that's not how, you know. So a good actor can do that and not always come up sounding the same or acting the same. Or as good an actor as Bogart was, he always played the same role, the tough guy who with the heart of gold that does the right thing.
Well, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Jeff, for having me. I really enjoyed being here.
See you next time on Spotlight Port Huron.